Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be cracking open Jay Samit's Disrupt You.
Ah,
You've sent over some excerpts really focusing on the core principles.
yeah.
So we'll be going chapter by chapter, uncovering the key takeaways, and really try to zero in on how you listening
Right.
can apply these insights to, shake things up. Your career, your life, maybe even the world around you.
I think one of the most exciting things about Samit's book is how he reframes this whole idea of disruption. He really pushes this idea that it's not just for like Silicon Valley types.
Right.
It's a mindset that really anyone can adopt and benefit from, but he's also very careful to distinguish disruption from simple innovation.
Yeah, and he makes that distinction right off the bat. So innovation is about making something, better, making a product better, improving a process.
Yeah.
But disruption is about replacing it entirely with something new,
Right.
something that solves the core problem in a different way. Almost like evolution versus just adding features.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And, he has this perfect example he brings up, which is laser discs.
Ooh, yeah.
Remember those?
Uh,
They had incredible picture quality.
oh, yeah, way better than VHS.
Way better than VHS tapes, but they completely missed the mark on what consumers actually wanted, which was the ability to record TV shows.
Right.
So it's not enough to just have a great product or even just a great idea.
That's such a crucial lesson, isn't it?
It is. It really is. You have to understand the underlying need that you're addressing.
And it makes me wonder, how do we even begin to identify those core needs?
Yeah.
Whether it's for, customers, if we're in business, for our employer, even in our personal lives, like what are those needs that we're really trying to meet?
That's where I think the idea of self-disruption comes in.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, he really digs into this, and he says, before you can disrupt the world, you have to disrupt yourself.
Yeah.
And he has this great example of Richard Branson missing a flight, getting frustrated and deciding, you know what, I'm going to charter a plane and sell seats to other stranded passengers. That sparked the idea for Virgin Atlantic.
Oh, wow. Talk about an aha moment, right? Turning a personal annoyance into, what, $1 billion business.
Exactly.
But it also illustrates that power of thinking differently,
Mm-hmm.
seeing a problem where others just see inconvenience.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into another concept that he brings up, which is analyzing your personal value chain, which might sound a little corporate-y at first,
Yeah, a little
but
too.
it's actually super, super useful for anyone, I think.
Okay, break that down for our listener. Like, what does analyzing your personal value chain actually look like?
So imagine taking a step back and looking at yourself almost like a company.
Okay.
What are your products, your skills, your talents, your knowledge? What are your processes, your habits, your routines, the way you approach things? And then ask yourself, are these serving me well? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the inefficiencies? Just like a business needs to streamline its operations, we need to streamline our own lives too.
So it's about identifying our strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
but also those like hidden habits or patterns that might be holding us back
Yeah.
without us even realizing it. Wow.
Yeah, and I think Rent the Runway is a great example of this from that chapter as well.
Oh, yeah.
They tapped into this pain point that a lot of women have, which is that nothing to wear syndrome, especially for, weddings or big events.
Yeah.
By offering these designer dress rentals, they basically disrupted the fashion industry, right?
Right.
It was more affordable, it was more sustainable. It was just a really smart solution to a problem that many people face.
I love that example because it shows how disruption can be both practical and like aspirational at the same time. It solves a real problem, but it also allows people to like experience something they might not have been able to otherwise.
Yeah.
So we've got this idea of self-disruption, analyzing our personal value chains. But where do we go from there?
Right.
Like, do we need like a detailed plan? There's a roadmap to disruption.
Yeah, well, he addresses that in chapter 3. He talks about the disruptors map.
Okay.
But he emphasizes it's not about like these rigid steps.
Yeah.
It's about having a direction and being flexible enough to adapt along the way.
So more like a compass than a GPS.
Yeah, exactly.
You know where you want to go,
Yeah,
but you're open to adjusting your route based on what you encounter.
exactly.
And you mentioned flexibility. That reminds me of the YouTube example from this chapter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, YouTube started as a dating site.
No way.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Really? I had no idea.
But the founders saw how users were uploading videos, and they pivoted to become this video sharing giant that we all know and love.
It makes you realize that even the biggest disruptors don't always get it right on the first try. They're willing to experiment. They're willing to kind of course correct. And that seems like such a key element of this whole mindset.
Absolutely. And that ties into another really crucial aspect of disruption, which is building your personal brand.
Okay, so chapter 4 dives into building a brand of one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know some people might cringe at the idea of personal branding.
Yeah.
They think it's all about self-promotion and, being fake. But I think Samit presents a much more nuanced view.
Absolutely, he does. For him, it's all about authenticity.
Okay.
Your brand should reflect your genuine values, your passions, and expertise. It's really about how you communicate your unique value proposition to the world.
Mm-hmm.
He tells this great story about how this mentor, Nancy, helped him rebrand himself in the music industry, which led to much greater success.
So it's not about creating some sort of persona or being someone you're not.
Right.
It's about refining how you present your true self
Right.
in a way that resonates with, your target audience. And it makes me wonder how much of this is about actual skills versus just perception.
It's a bit of both, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so.
You need to have the substance, the skills, the knowledge, but you also need to be able to articulate that value, to connect with people in a way that makes them understand what you bring to the table.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about crafting your message, being visible, and building relationships. But what about those of us, who are working within companies?
Yeah.
Can we be disruptors without starting our own businesses?
Absolutely. And that's where the idea of entrepreneurship comes in. Chapter 5, he emphasizes that disruption can happen from within organizations.
Okay.
And he, of course, has firsthand experience with this. He talks about modernizing EMI Music,
Done.
a massive record label from the inside.
So you don't have to be a CEO or a founder to be a disruptor.
Right.
You can be an entrepreneur shaking things up and driving innovation within an existing structure. That's encouraging, but how do you even get started with that? Do you need special permission or a fancy title?
No, I think initiative is key.
Okay.
He talks about what he calls the dinosaur effect.
Huh?
Big companies can get slow and complacent, overlooking opportunities that are right under their noses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where entrepreneurs can really shine. By spotting those gaps and being proactive in filling them. He even tells this story about his own son using Twitter to create value at a talent agency way before everyone else caught on, just by seeing an opportunity and taking initiative.
That's great. It sounds like entrepreneurship is about being resourceful, observant, and maybe even a little bit rebellious.
Yeah.
In a good way, of course.
Wait, a good way. And that kind of leads us to this next concept, which is the zombie idea.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of unsettling, but also exciting, which Samit introduces in Chapter 6. It's all about killing your idea before someone else does.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Zombie idea sounds a little scary.
Yeah, right.
But I'm guessing it's more of a metaphorical zombie?
Exactly. It's more of a thought experiment.
Okay.
Imagine taking your idea, your business plan, whatever it is you're passionate about, and just trying to destroy it. Ask yourself the toughest questions. What are its weaknesses? What could go wrong? What if a competitor comes up with a better version?
So it's about stress testing your idea.
Yes.
Trying to poke holes in it so you can actually make it stronger.
Exactly. Exactly.
I can see how that would be valuable, but it also sounds pretty brutal.
It can be, but that's the point, right? He believes that by deliberately confronting these potential pitfalls, you can turn your idea into something that's truly unkillable.
Okay.
He even points out that Steve Jobs faced tons of rejection with the personal computer initially,
Oh, really?
which just goes to show that even the best ideas need refining and resilience.
That's a great reminder that setbacks are part of the process.
Yeah.
And that overcoming them can actually make your idea even stronger.
Yeah.
And speaking of setbacks, what happens when, despite all this zombie proofing, an idea just isn't working? Is that when we throw in the towel?
Not necessarily. Sometimes the most disruptive move you can make is recognizing when a path isn't working and shifting gears, and that's what Chapter 7 is all about, pivoting your energies.
So it's about knowing when to cut your losses and try something different, even if it means letting go of something you've, invested time and energy in, which can be tough.
It can be tough. It definitely takes courage. But Samit stresses that pivoting isn't the same as failure.
Okay.
It's about adapting strategically to changing circumstances.
Right.
And he gives some, pretty inspiring examples to illustrate this. Think about Apple. They went from focusing primarily on computers to revolutionizing consumer electronics with, first the iPod,
Right.
then the iPhone, then the iPad. Talk about a successful pivot.
That's a phenomenal example. They completely transformed their business and like the world along with it.
Yeah.
But it also highlights that pivoting isn't just for like these tech giants. Didn't he mention Yelp as a
Yeah.
smaller company that did this really well?
He did. Yelp started out with these automated reviews,
Right.
but they weren't really gaining traction. Then they pivoted to user-generated content, allowing people to share their own experiences, and that's what really propelled them to success.
So it's about being open to feedback,
Right.
recognizing when something isn't working, and just being willing to change course,
Yeah.
which is a valuable lesson, I think, for anyone, whether you're running a company or just navigating your own career path. But once you've got a solid idea, maybe you've even pivoted a bit.
Yeah.
How do you actually turn it into, a successful venture? The business world can be pretty daunting, to say the least.
It can be. That's where I think the rest of the book really gets into like the nuts and bolts of disruption. In chapter 8, he introduces this concept of unlocking the value chain.
Okay, I'm picturing like a literal chain here.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing this is more metaphorical.
More metaphorical.
Help our listener understand what this means, like in a practical sense.
So think of it this way. Every product or service goes through a series of steps from, the initial idea to the final customer.
Okay.
That's the value chain. And each step adds value, but some steps are more crucial, more valuable than others. Disruptors, they excel at identifying those key leverage points and focusing their energy there.
So it's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
where you can create the most impact, add the most value.
Precisely. And I think Airbnb is a perfect example of this.
Sure.
They didn't build hotels, right?
Right.
They disrupted the hospitality industry by connecting homeowners and travelers directly.
Right.
They focused on the distribution aspect of the value chain. It was a simple but brilliant move.
That's a great example. It's about like cutting out the middleman and creating a more efficient system. But how do you even begin to analyze a value chain? Wouldn't that require like a lot of industry knowledge and research?
It certainly helps to understand the industry you're disrupting. But sometimes the most valuable links in the chain are the ones that people just overlook.
Okay.
He talks about De Beers, the diamond company, right? They created massive value not by focusing on the diamonds themselves,
Right.
but by masterfully marketing the idea of diamonds as these symbols of love and commitment.
Right. Right.
A diamond is forever. I mean, pure genius.
Incredible. It shows how perception and storytelling can be just as valuable as the product itself. But what about research and development? That seems like a whole other world of like complexity.
It is, but chapter 9, he tackles this idea of unlocking the value of waste in R&D.
Okay.
He believes that even, quote, failed research or products can be turned into successes with the right perspective.
Now, that's an intriguing concept.
Yeah.
But how do you find value in something that's like considered a failure? Isn't that a bit counterintuitive?
It can seem that way, but he uses the example of Viagra, which was initially developed for cardiovascular problems.
Oh, wow.
And the side effects, well, let's just say it became a billion-dollar opportunity.
That's an amazing story. It makes you wonder how many other like failed projects are just waiting to be repurposed or reimagined.
Yeah.
So it's about looking at things from a different angle, being open to like unexpected possibilities.
Exactly. And that leads us to the realm of design, which he explores in chapter 10. Disruption through aesthetics might sound kind of superficial.
It does a little bit.
But he argues that even small design changes can have a huge impact.
Okay, so we're not just talking about making things look pretty here.
No, not at all.
There's a deeper purpose to this.
Absolutely. He talks about Nestle Waters saving millions by redesigning their bottles to use less plastic. It's about functionality, efficiency, and sustainability all rolled into one.
So it's about smart design, using less to achieve more, which is a very disruptive concept in itself.
Absolutely.
But can you give an example of design disruption that like really captivated people's attention?
Yeah, he talks about the rise of online travel agencies like Hipmunk. They didn't introduce any groundbreaking technology. They simply disrupted the market with user-friendly design.
Oh, right.
Their interface made booking flights so much easier and more intuitive than the clunky old systems.
That's so true. I remember when Hipmunk first came out, it was like such a breath of fresh air. It
Yeah.
made the whole travel planning experience so much more enjoyable. So good design is about more than just aesthetics. It's about solving problems and creating a better user experience.
Exactly. And that brings us to production,
Right.
which can seem, kind of daunting, but he breaks it down in chapter 11, focusing on reuse, repurpose, recreate. And he really highlights, the 3D printing revolution, which
Mhm.
is putting the power of manufacturing in the hands of everyday people.
3D printing is like pretty mind-blowing, right? It's like something out of science fiction.
It is.
But it's becoming increasingly accessible. What kind of examples does he use to illustrate this?
Well, he talks about Local Motors printing an entire car in just 44 hours.
Oh my God.
It's incredible. And it's not just about creating these physical products. He also discusses, open source hardware
Okay.
and platforms like Pinocchio, which allow anyone to design and manufacture their own products.
That's like democratizing production,
Yeah,
empowering individuals to become like creators and innovators.
exactly.
It's truly revolutionary. But once you've got a product, whether it's a 3D printed car or like a brilliant new app, how do you get people to buy it? Marketing and sales can feel like a whole other beast.
It can. He tackles that head on in chapter 12 with a focus on finding the problem to fit your solution. He believes that great marketing is more than just advertising. It's about making people want something, even if they didn't realize they needed it before.
Okay, that's intriguing. So it's not just about filling an existing need, it's about creating demand for something new and innovative. But how do you actually do that? What are some examples of like disruptive marketing in action?
Well, he talks about, Apple stores and how they've shifted the focus from transactions to experiences. You go there not just to buy a product,
Right.
but to immerse yourself in the Apple world, to interact with the technology, to get personalized help. It's a brilliant marketing strategy.
It makes sense. It's about building a relationship with the customer, creating that sense of community and belonging. It's not just a store, it's a destination.
Right.
And that reminds me of another company he mentioned, Zappos.
Yes. They've made customer service, basically, their primary marketing strategy. Their focus on delivering exceptional experiences has created this loyal following and set them apart in a really crowded market.
It's about exceeding expectations, going above and beyond to create a positive and memorable experience, and turning customers into advocates. But what about getting your product out into the world? Like, how do you disrupt the distribution side of things?
Yeah, that's the focus of chapter 13, where he talks about unlocking unattained value in distribution. He sees the internet as this unlimited shelf space, removing the limitations of physical stores and traditional retail models. Just look at, the dominance of Amazon.
Right, they've completely revolutionized how we shop.
They have. But Amazon's a massive company. Can you give an example of a company that disrupted distribution in a more niche market?
Yeah.
Well, he contrasts the failure of Sony's e-reader, the Libre, with the phenomenal success of Amazon's Kindle.
Okay.
And what was the key difference? Amazon understood the importance of content. They didn't just sell a device.
Right.
They created this entire ecosystem with millions of books available at your fingertips. It was a game changer.
That's a great example. It's not just about the technology. It's about creating a seamless and compelling experience for the user.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Money. How do you fund all these disruptive ideas?
That's where chapter 14 gets interesting. He talks about other people's money. Ooh.
And it's not as shady as it sounds.
Okay.
He believes you can fund your ventures without taking on debt or losing equity.
Okay, now I'm really curious. How do you make that happen? Isn't funding always a huge hurdle for, entrepreneurs and innovators?
It can be, but he points to this really inspiring example of Muhammad Yunus and his pioneering work with microloans.
Oh, yeah.
Yunus disrupted traditional banking by offering small loans to entrepreneurs in developing countries, empowering millions of people to lift themselves out of poverty. It's a testament to the power of, alternative funding models.
That's an incredible story. It shows how disruption can be a force for social good.
Yes.
Not just about profits and market share. But what about the role of the crowd in all of this? Crowdfunding and the sharing economy are huge trends these days.
They are, and he digs into that in chapter 15, Disruption in the Era of the Crowd. He highlights the power of collective intelligence and how platforms like Wikipedia, Craigslist, Airbnb, Uber, TaskRabbit, have all disrupted entire industries. So it's about harnessing the wisdom and resources of the masses to achieve something bigger than any individual could accomplish alone.
Exactly. It's about creating systems where people can contribute their skills, their ideas, even their assets to create something new and valuable.
Right.
It's a really powerful concept, but it also raises questions about, trust and transparency in these crowd-based ecosystems.
That's a good point. Building trust is crucial in any collaborative effort, especially when you're dealing with, like, strangers online. But let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
Can this idea of disruption be applied to, like, bigger issues,
They
world problems?
Yeah, that's what Chapter 16 explores, disrupt the world. He believes that disruption can be a powerful force for positive change on a global scale, addressing social, political, and environmental challenges.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some examples of this in action?
Well, he talks about Aecon Lighting Africa, a project that's bringing solar energy to millions of people in Africa who lack access to electricity. It's a fantastic example of using innovation to solve a, really pressing problem.
That's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
And then there's the Arab Spring, which, while complex, and certainly not without its challenges, showed how the internet can be this powerful tool for social and political change.
Absolutely. And it highlights how technology can empower individuals and facilitate movements for greater freedom and democracy. But it also underscores the importance of, responsible use
Right.
and the potential for unintended consequences.
That's a crucial point. Disruption can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's essential to think critically about the potential impact, both positive and negative, before, like, jumping in head first.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, self-disruption. It seems like that's, like, the foundation for everything else we've discussed.
You're absolutely right. And that's where he brings it all together in Chapter 17, the Self-Disruptor's Manifesto. It's a call to action, to challenge our assumptions, to embrace discomfort, and to constantly reinvent ourselves. He holds up icons like Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk as examples of what's possible when you embrace the spirit of disruption.
So it's not just about disrupting industries.
Right.
It's about disrupting our own lives, our own patterns of thinking and behaving
Yeah.
to unlock our full potential. It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves, both personally and professionally.
Precisely. And that's a really powerful message to leave our listener with. But before we conclude this deep dive, I think we have some final thoughts to share.
We do. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive.
We spent this episode journeying through Jay Samit's Disrupt You,
We have.
unpacking how disruption can be this force for change, not just in business, but in our personal lives and even on, like, a global scale.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride through those key takeaways, right?
It has.
From, laser discs to Airbnb to the Arab Spring. We've seen how disruption can manifest in so many different ways. What really struck me is how Samit reframes disruption as, like, a positive force,
Right,
something
yeah.
to be embraced rather than feared.
Yeah, he definitely emphasizes that it's a mindset shift,
Okay.
a way of approaching, challenges and opportunities with this fresh perspective. Instead of getting stuck in those old ways of doing things, he encourages us to become the change makers, to seek out those solutions where others see only obstacles.
And he provides a ton of practical advice, inspiring examples to help us actually make that happen. For me, one of the biggest takeaways is this idea of self-disruption as, like, an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix.
Yeah.
It's about constantly evolving, questioning assumptions, and pushing our boundaries to, reach our full potential.
Yeah.
What about you? What key message would you want our listener to walk away with today?
I think it all boils down to the power of perspective. Disruption often comes from simply looking at things differently, asking new questions, being willing to experiment. It might feel uncomfortable at times, but that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe the seed of disruption is already within you, just waiting for the right conditions to sprout.
I love that. So to you listening, we encourage you to reflect on what resonated with you during this deep dive into Disrupt You. What area of your life, your work, or even the world around you are you inspired to disrupt? We'd love to hear about it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep disrupting.